as we waited, our local doctor friends at the local clinic organized a simulated snake bite. They really wanted to go through the whole process, not just land the antivenom and say hooray, but to actually go through the process of then administering, a simulated administering of the antivenom and so on. So we had a teenager from Pampalhosa who was very kind to act the part. This is the hand-launched Frankie drone, just to show you that it's very light and so very transportable as well. You don't need much space to get it all the way down to the Amazon rainforest. Now, we weren't quite sure, I'll be completely honest, whether this was going to work. It was a last-minute plan B, ad hoc, fully improvised, totally not prepared. But Juan very bravely made the call and said, let's do this. We have nothing to lose. And so there were many minutes, a good half an hour of angst when we were in Pampalhosa waiting for Frankie to show up as the time was ticking, and the stress was becoming higher and higher until finally, about 35 minutes later, some of the villagers were the first to spot Frankie in the air, and you see it flying and very smooth landing here on the grass. This was the cold pack that it carried. Inside the cold pack was the refrigerated anti-venom that was then used to administer our fake patient, and we went through the whole process. If you've seen the videos on our website, you see a lot more of that simulated treatment. So just to sum up, a regular canoe will take up to 6 hours, but you compare that with a drone with 35 minutes, it becomes really, really quite compelling as far as the nature of the payload, namely antivenom. You do not necessarily want to wait an hour, let alone 6 hours, if you're out of antivenom and you've been bitten by a snake in the Amazon. So this was really tremendous success. We were very excited because obviously it was all improvised at the last minute. And once this happened, we decided, well, we might as well send Frankie back to Contamana. And so we spoke further with the local doctor here that you see on the left, from Pampalhosa, and asked him, is there anything else use case-wise delivery needs that you might have? And he said, absolutely. Sometimes when we're not able to diagnose a patient in Pampalhosa, we have to either send him or her to Contamana on a 4, 5, 6 hour boat ride, or send a blood sample to Contamana and then have the blood sample tested there. Wouldn't it be amazing and incredible and unprecedented if we could actually fly that blood sample? So this is when your chief technology officer comes in very, very handy. And so I, without hesitation, volunteered Adam for the blood sample that was then placed back into the refrigerated cold pack with the antivenom added to Frankie. Now, we were flying at night, and this was deliberate. We wanted to do a night flight, and there were a number of challenges there that we go into in our report, so I encourage you to read that. I won't go into detail here. But obviously, you're flying at night, you kind of want some lights on your drone, and because this had all been done at the last minute and improvised, the best we could do was basically take a bike light and tape that to Frankie's nose. And here, is Frankie being launched in the night in Pampalhosa. You can see it's completely pitch black. Meanwhile, at the landing area in Contamana, the local community had rallied, come together to help us light up the local football field with their motorbikes. And so this was as a few of them had just arrived and had switched on their lights to light up the runway, so to speak, for Frankie. Unfortunately, things don't always go the way you expect them to go. Frankie just missed the football field, which is not a technical error. We take full responsibility for that. It just so happens, after some investigation, that the GPS coordinates that we had for the football field were simply not accurate. So we fed Frankie the wrong GPS coordinates. He didn't do anything wrong. But what was also very telling about this mishap was that the platform only needed one replacement, a servo, a $3 piece needed to be replaced, and that was it. Otherwise, it was totally intact. The cold pack, the antivenom, and the blood sample were completely intact, and we were able to take the drone back to the main square of Contamana, where our one of the most outstanding doctors that we had the opportunity to work with, Dr. Giovanna, that you see here, presented the results of the project, reiterated again why we were doing this, for what reason, and what we were going to plan to do next as well. So again, you know, community engagement, public awareness is really key, not just before the fact, but also after you do these field tests and projects. So this was obviously very exciting for us, because we had intended to do a completely different project there with a completely different platform, and that had unfortunately failed, but Juan and team in Peru were able to save the day at the last minute. And kudos to the entire team. This was truly a first and an incredible, unique success. At the same time, we also, all of us at We Robotics in Peru Flying Labs, fully understand that these were just 2 flights, and 2 flights doesn't necessarily prove anything. There are, you know, a number of issues here to keep in mind. First of all, you know, it tends to rain in the Amazon rainforest, and we had the good fortune of having fairly decent weather. But if it rains really hard, you know, Frankie's going to have a heck of a time, as well as, you know, to be honest, the $40,000 drone. It's going to have a heck of a lot of hard time to actually fly in heavy downpours. So, you know, we have to understand that there are certain limitations to the use of different kinds of drones. And, you know, yes, it was only a test. We don't claim anything else. It was a field mission with some initial field tests. It was only 2 flights. It was only 500 grams, and it was only 40 kilometers. That doesn't mean we weren't successful. It was incredibly successful, especially when you juxtapose that against the more expensive, sophisticated drone. But, you know, we all understand that we have to do a lot more work to explore the opportunity here in terms of using affordable cargo drones that can be repaired and maintained on site, that can be operated by local partners, and so on. So we're just getting started. And, you know, this is where I want to again reiterate, it's not about which drone is inherently better. It really depends on all these different factors and conditions that you have to manage in a given different project. In the case of the Amazon rainforest, for the specific use case that we're exploring, we believe that we have shown that perhaps going with the more affordable drones is actually going to work. And as you recall the pictures of Frankie, I just want to reiterate that, you know, humanitarian technology like drones, robotics, and so on does not have to be sexy. It just has to work. I don't care if it's got 3 layers of duct tape with 5 rubber bands. If it works, it works. That's fine. We don't need shiny Silicon Valley technology either. Of course, for other cases, Frankie won't work, and you will need the other more sophisticated drones. So it really, really depends on a number of different factors. Now, something that we've not made public yet, because these additional field tests happened literally about 48 hours ago, thanks again to our team at Peru Flying Labs, spearheaded by our good colleague and partner, Juan. They tried to push the envelope even further. Namely, the attempt here was to fly a drone 75 kilometers, so almost doubling the 40-kilometer flights we had done to Pampalmosa. So flying cargo delivery to another small town village called Tiruntan here. And then the idea was to quickly change the batteries and fly on another 55 kilometers to Pucallpa. And the reason that Pucallpa is so important is because it's actually a city. It is a hub for that area of the Amazon rainforest. It's got a full-fledged airport with commercial air traffic and so on, meaning there are a lot of medications and supplies, cargo that comes in to Pucallpa as well. So it's an incredibly important hub for the region from a public health perspective. Here, instead of delivering antivenom, we delivered what's called physiological saline, and about 10 5-millimeter bottles of them. This was to simulate blood transportation at the request of the local doctors who had identified this as a really important need for that particular region, and we wanted to make sure that we could keep the blood within appropriate temperatures as is needed by the doctors there. So for this, we used Frankie's big sister, who we've called Laura, after the first ever Peruvian female doctor in the country back in the 1800s. And Laura has a longer range than Frankie, which is why we were able to attempt the 75 kilometers. Again, we being here, the Peru Flying Labs team. So all credit goes to them, obviously. And again, we used the cold pack, added the saline to the cargo bay of Laura's cargo bay platform, and then launched the platform. And it was successful. So we were able to successfully carry that payload 75 kilometers, which was, again, another first for the Amazon rainforest. And of course, you have to compare, what were the other alternatives in terms of transportation. Well, the option with Contamana is you do have the option of taking a faster boat, which obviously costs a little more, but it gets there, faster definitely much faster than a canoe would. And a riverboat will take about 4 hours, give or take. And in the case of Laura, the drone, Laura was able to get there in about an hour and 10 minutes. So you are still cutting quite a bit of time in terms of the delivery. For the second leg, the team spent about 20 minutes, half an hour, quickly changing the batteries and doing some checks, and then had Laura on her way to Pucallpa. Unfortunately, Laura didn't make it all the way there. She landed about 2 kilometers before the designated landing area, and we've been, rather our team in Peru have been investigating this. First of all, Laura was recovered, and the payload was recovered, and so on. And there's been some investigation now in terms of what might have been the reason. And we're still exploring, but we think that it might have been due to a silly mistake, but silly mistakes do happen. That the wrong batteries were put into Laura. It could be that it was actually the batteries from Frankie that were added to Laura, and they're different platforms and they require different batteries. But that was not very clear, at least on site at the time. So, lesson learned. What's remarkable is that Laura was still able to do those 53 kilometers, and of course, the battery issue is something that will never ever happen again. You learn very quickly, and what we'll be doing in any event is preparing formal checklists for our partners in Peru and elsewhere in other flying labs, to make sure that we do what commercial manned aviation does after and before each flight, is go through checklists. I don't know if any of you have been to the Amazon rainforest, but having been there in December, I can tell you it's hot, it's humid, it's very tiring, you don't sleep a lot, and so mistakes inevitably can happen. And that's why checklists are absolutely imperative, and that's what we're going to be working on already this week with all our labs in developing these checklists, so that we make sure that we don't have this challenge anymore. In any event, this lesson learned has finally given me the opportunity to use a picture that I've always wanted to use in my slides, which is namely Jean-Luc Picard and the facepalm. It happens. We learn, and what's most important here is that we learn from our mistakes and that they don't happen again. Luckily, we used a platform that's very robust, very durable, very light, very safe, and we were not flying in the middle of a city. We were flying basically 95% of the time over rivers and tree canopies and so on. So, that's why we're also quite interested in using these more affordable solutions as well.